Okay, so today we are diving into a field that's, well, music to my ears. We've gotten a bunch of requests to do a deep dive on sound design, and thankfully, you guys pointed us to some really interesting resources from RoleCatcher to guide us. We're talking career guides, interview tips, even a look at some of the cool stuff their platform does. Should be a fascinating conversation.
It really is a fascinating field. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just about technical skills. It's about artistic vision. It's about collaboration, really having a deep understanding of how sound shapes like emotions, how we perceive things.
It's so true. And I think RoleCatcher really hits the nail on the head when they describe a sound designer as a sonic storyteller. It makes you realize how often we take sound for granted, right? Like we don't even realize how much it's impacting our experience.
It's huge. Think
Mhm.
about like a tense scene in a movie, right? You can have a blood-curdling scream, but a skilled sound designer can make a creaking door hinge way more unsettling just by understanding, like acoustics, or even just knowing how to use silence effectively.
Oh, for sure. It's like all the more impactful for what you don't hear sometimes, right? So RoleCatcher defines a sound designer as the, quote, architect of a performance's soundscape, end quote. Which, that sounds, I don't know, very important, but what does that actually mean in practice?
It means wearing a lot of hats.
Ugh.
I mean, one day you could be researching like historical sound effects for a period piece,
Mm.
and the next you're creating these crazy otherworldly soundscapes for, I don't know, a sci-fi film. They're recording, they're editing, composing, manipulating. It's really living and breathing audio.
Wow. And it's not just like holding up in a sound booth with all the fancy tech. RoleCatcher really emphasizes that collaboration is key in this role.
It's essential. A sound designer has to be a master collaborator, working side by side with directors, actors, even set designers to make sure that every sonic element is like totally in sync with the overall vision for the project.
It's like, I don't know, conducting a symphony of sound effects. And speaking of, RoleCatcher also mentioned the importance of documentation in this role, like cue lists and technical specs, which honestly are probably things most people outside the industry haven't even heard of.
Right, but they're totally crucial. Think about a live theater production, for example. The cue list is basically like a roadmap for the entire sound crew. It tells them exactly when to play each sound, how loud it should be, how long it should last. It ensures that like a door slams at the precise moment an actor steps on stage.
It's incredible the level of precision involved.
It has to be, otherwise it can really throw off the whole performance.
Oh, absolutely. It's like choreographing sound.
Yeah.
So speaking of precision, let's talk about those technical chops, right? What kind of software is a sound designer like living and breathing in?
Well, RoleCatcher calls out digital audio workstations, or DAOs for short. They're basically like digital recording studios where sound designers can record, edit, mix, and master everything. It's their canvas.
So knowing your way around a day is essential. Are there any like industry standard ones that aspiring sound designers should be aware of?
Yeah, there are a few big players like
Mm.
Pro Tools, Logic Pro, Ableton Live, each has their own, I guess, strengths and weaknesses. But I think the most important thing is to really master those core concepts of audio editing and manipulation, because those will translate no matter what specific software you're using.
It's about those underlying principles. And like you said before, this field is all about collaboration, and RoleCatcher really emphasized the need for those soft skills too. Communication, being adaptable, working well on a team.
Oh, they're non-negotiable, honestly. Like, you could be the most technically gifted sound wizard out there, but if you can't effectively communicate your vision or, like, take feedback constructively, it's going to be tough.
It's about finding that sweet spot between the artistic vision and the realities of collaborating on a project. Now let's zoom out for a second and talk about the career path itself. RoleCatcher kind of paints this picture that I think a lot of us are familiar with. You start as a junior sound designer, and then you climb that ladder to that coveted senior role.
Yeah, it's a very traditional apprenticeship model, which makes a lot of sense, right?
Mhm.
You're starting by assisting those more seasoned professionals, really soaking up their knowledge, their experience. It's like any other craft you learn by doing, by being in the trenches, making mistakes in a safe environment.
So what does that actually look like for a junior sound designer? What are they doing day to day?
According to RoleCatcher, you'd be assisting with developing sound concepts, maybe recording audio for various projects, potentially even prepping those meticulous cue lists we were just talking about.
It's about laying that groundwork, building up those really fundamental skills that are going to serve you well as you move up.
Exactly. And you're also constantly putting those soft skills to the test, too.
Yeah.
As a junior, you're getting a lot of feedback, learning how to incorporate that feedback, adapting your approach. It's a huge period of growth, not just technically, but professionally too.
So you're learning, you're growing, and eventually you're ready to take on more and more responsibility, maybe even start leading projects yourself. What's RoleCatcher's take on those mid-level sound designers?
I think this is where sound designers really hit their stride, start developing that unique sonic style. They're supervising projects, mentoring junior designers, really making their mark on the industry.
It becomes as much about leadership and management as it is about the technical stuff.
Right, exactly.
And then, of course, we have those veterans, those senior sound designers who have years of experience and, a wealth of knowledge.
Hmm.
RoleCatcher positions them as the leaders,
Hmm.
the ones overseeing these really complex projects, mentoring teams, really shaping the sonic landscape of entire productions.
Yeah, it's like they've become those mentors that they once relied on.
And, what I find so interesting is that even with this sort of traditional career ladder, RoleCatcher also highlighted the flexibility that a career in sound design can offer.
Oh, totally. While theaters, concert halls, and those big film studios are definitely the classic settings, sound designers can also work remotely, build up their portfolio through freelance projects. Some even go on to the world of sound art, where they can get really experimental.
So there's space for those who want to kind of forge their own path, too.
Absolutely. RoleCatcher mentioned folks creating these independent sound installations or designing super immersive soundscapes for things like virtual reality experiences.
Wow, now that is what I call sonic innovation. So it seems like, with all this in mind, there's this constant need to adapt, to evolve in this field.
Oh, 100%. Technology is always advancing, artistic trends are constantly shifting, and a good sound designer, they had to stay curious, keep experimenting, always be learning. It's what keeps the work fresh and exciting.
It's about being a lifelong student of sound. And speaking of learning, let's get into some of those insider tips that RoleCatcher offers to aspiring sound designers. What kind of wisdom do they have to share?
Well, they talk a lot about the importance of networking, of really building up a solid network within the industry, connecting with other sound designers, with directors, producers, really anyone who's involved in, bringing these sonic visions to life.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially in a field that's so collaborative, right? Where those personal recommendations and that creative synergy can really make a difference.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be some stuffy formal thing, just attending industry events, joining some online forums, or even reaching out to people whose work you admire. You never know what could come from a simple conversation.
Right, it's all about making those connections. Now, in addition to a strong network, RoleCatcher also stressed the importance of a killer portfolio. What should aspiring sound designers be, like, showcasing in theirs?
It's all about curating a collection of your absolute best work, the projects that really highlight your range, your creativity, those technical skills. It's your sonic resume, a chance to make a strong first impression.
So quality over quantity.
100%. It's much better to have like 3 amazing tracks that demonstrate true mastery than 10 kind of mediocre ones.
Mhm.
And variety is key too. Maybe you have a real knack for those realistic Foley effects, but you also love creating these atmospheric soundscapes. Show it all off.
So it's like you're saying, this is my sonic playground, and I know how to use all the toys.
Exactly. And this is where I think RoleCatcher gets really interesting. They actually use technology to help match employers with potential candidates based on their specific skills and experience.
Oh, wow, really? So how does that work?
So sound designers can create these really detailed profiles on RoleCatcher, listing their skills, what software they're proficient in, even their preferred genres. And then employers can use the platform to search for candidates who match their specific needs.
That's incredible. It's like a matchmaking service, but for sound design.
That's a great way to put it. It really takes a lot of the guesswork out of the job hunt.
Totally. And it speaks to how technology can really be used to make those creative connections. But let's shift gears a bit here. We've talked a lot about the technical side, the career path, but what about the intangible rewards of being a sound designer? What's it like to shape emotions through sound, to move people with audio?
It really is an amazing feeling. I mean, imagine you're working on a film and you create the perfect soundscape for this really pivotal scene. The music swelling as a character experiences a moment of loss, or that sharp metallic clang that makes the audience jump in their seats. You're playing with emotions. You're heightening the impact of the story.
You're like a sonic sculptor, right? Chiseling away at the audio to create an entire emotional landscape for the audience.
I love that analogy because it's true. And just like a sculptor chooses the right type of stone, a good sound designer is thinking so carefully about each sound, each texture, each rhythm, to evoke a very specific feeling.
It's incredible, and it really requires a deep understanding of how we respond to sound, almost on this like primal level.
Absolutely. And it's not just about creating an emotional response either. It's about world building.
Okay.
Think about the soundscapes of your favorite video games, for example. It's those really intricate layers of sound, the ambient noise, the dialogue, the music that transport you to another place.
Oh, it's so true. It's like you can practically feel the humidity of a rainforest or like the vastness of the ocean just through the sound design.
Exactly. A talented sound designer can literally transport you to another world, even if that world exists only in our imaginations.
That's the magic of it all. And it seems like when it comes to sound design, the possibilities really are endless. You're not limited to just one medium, one genre, or anything.
Not at all. I mean, one day you could be working on a historical drama, meticulously recreating the sounds of horse-drawn carriages, and the next you're creating these futuristic soundscapes for a sci-fi game. It's really as limitless as our own imagination.
I love that. And it's a field that's constantly pushing those boundaries, embracing those new technologies.
Which is what keeps it so exciting. It's never static. There's always something new to learn, something new to explore.
It's about being that lifelong student of sound, like we said. Now, before we wrap things up, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the importance of a strong portfolio. What are some common mistakes you see aspiring sound designers making when putting theirs together?
Well, I see a lot of folks trying to be like a jack of all trades, but a master of none. It's tempting to just throw every single project you've ever worked on in there.
Right, because more is always better, right?
Well, not necessarily. You can actually dilute the impact of your strongest work by doing that.
It's about being choosy then, curating those projects that really showcase like what you're capable of.
Exactly. Think of it like putting together an art exhibit, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't just hang every painting you've ever done. You choose the pieces that tell a story, that represent you as an artist.
It's like choosing the highlights, the pieces that best represent your style.
Exactly. And on a more technical note, I often see folks neglecting metadata, which sounds kind of boring, but
That it's important?
oh, absolutely. You could have the most amazing sound effects, the most immersive soundscapes, but if those files aren't properly labeled,
It's going to be a nightmare for anyone trying to navigate them.
exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine going to a library where none of the books are categorized or labeled. Total chaos.
Okay, so label those files.
Yes, organize everything into clear categories, maybe even include some brief descriptions to give some context.
It's about making it easy for people to really experience and connect with your work. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to go back to something you were talking about earlier, that power of sound to like really evoke emotion, to transport us. Do you have any advice for our aspiring sound designers out there on how to, I don't know, tap into that power, how to really find their sonic voice?
You know, one of the simplest but most powerful things you can do is to really become a student of sound in your everyday life.
What do you mean by that?
Just pay attention to the soundscape around you. Listen to how the wind rustles through the leaves, how rain sounds different on different surfaces, how the chirping of birds in the morning contrasts with the, I don't know, the hum of traffic during rush hour.
Tuning into that everyday symphony.
Exactly. And don't just listen. Try recording those sounds.
Yeah.
Experiment with manipulating them using different audio software.
See how they make you feel, how you can shape them.
Precisely. The more you do that, the more you develop your own sonic palette, your own unique way of using those sounds.
Oh, I love that. So it's about finding inspiration in those everyday moments.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to break the mold, to experiment. Some of the most innovative sound design happens when you push those boundaries.
It's about taking risks, trying new things, never losing that curiosity.
Exactly.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. I think we often take sound for granted, but it really is such a powerful tool.
Oh, it really is. And it's amazing to see more and more people interested in exploring the world of sound design.
It's a fascinating field with so much potential. So to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this sonic adventure.
And a huge thank you to RoleCatcher for those awesome resources.
Absolutely. And to our aspiring sound designers out there, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and most importantly, never stop listening.
We can't wait to see, or should I say, hear what you create.
Beautifully said. Until next time, happy listening.